Olympic 800-meter champion Caster Semenya's lawyer says he's preparing to approach the European Courts of Human Rights to challenge her middle distance ban. It's after World Athletics governing body in 2018 banned Semenya and other athletes with high testosterone from races between 400 meters and a mile unless they take hormone-altering medication. For more on this, we're joined by Semenya's lawyer, Greg Knott. Greg, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. Of course, you've had time to recoup over the last 3 weeks since you heard the outcome of the case in Switzerland. What is your next move?
Good evening, Sally, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you for hosting me this evening. We, as a group of lawyers, are still considering our steps, but in all likelihood, it looks as if we will be taking the matter to the European Court for Human Rights in Strasbourg, France.
Why the European Court in particular?
Well, they have conventions in regard to human rights, and any contracting party to the European Court for Human Rights is bound by the conventions for human rights. And one of the human rights which have been flagrantly abused is the discrimination of Caster by these regulations. And the regulations have been formed and regulated by contracting parties to this particular human rights body. And we think this would be appropriate forum to be considered to be the next step for us to fight. It will also be on the universal stage, and one which will grab enough attention and hopefully a remedy for Caster.
Is this something that you're doing alone, or do you have support, in particular from some of the local Chapter 9 institutions who we've seen be very vocal, but not sure yet if they're actually contributing to this fight?
Kathy, absolutely right. We meet on a weekly basis. The next meeting will take place next week. We have the full support of the Gender Commission as well as the Human Rights Commission as well. And in that regard, they've been not only vocal but very helpful in their support to us. And I'm glad you asked the question. I don't alone sit as the single lawyer advocating Caster's case. We have lawyers in Switzerland, in Canada, in Johannesburg, and we'll draw upon other lawyers to bolster our case as we go forward as well. So this is a united front that we are going to have, and far more strengthened than we've had in the past. Not to say that in any instance where we're weak, but we feel that where we can, we'll bring in further advice. In this regard, we also draw upon medical and scientific advisors, both based in the States and in the UK as well as South Africans. So it's a global fight and a global team.
Right now, of course, Caster Semenya is the person who becomes the case study for such a case. But are
Yes.
there other athletes, international athletes, who are in Caster's position, who may join this fight, especially in as far as it relates to the abuse on human rights and the impediment on the right of the individuals?
That's a very good question. Caster has run with this case literally for 11 years of her career. She's done both a running career as well as fighting legal challenges, which she's done, as the nation accepts, fundamentally and wonderfully done. She is literally the poster child of athletics in South Africa as well as challenges to the world body. Whether she is joined by others is yet to be seen, but Caster is the person, and she recognizes two things here, Kathy, is that one, she wants to fight, she wants to continue to fight, and this is not a lawyer-driven mandate in any regard. It's Caster's wish that we continue to fight. And secondly, she realizes she alone, whilst the figurehead may be joined by others. At this stage, we are representing Caster. We have no mandate from any other athletes at all.
What kind of shift do you think is going to be required, especially from the outlook of some of these world athletics bodies, in order to be able to recognize that some of the recommendations that they are making do fundamentally infringe on the individual's human rights?
Absolutely right. once again, a wonderful question to ask, because the strategy is not only one of legalities and technical legal points that we've got to win in courts of law, but advocacy in institutions such as the United Nations, in institutions such as the African Union, in institutions such as the Commonwealth bodies as well. So it's an all-encompassing, embracing shift that we've got to make sure it happens. And then to this end, that's why the Chapter 9 institutions are so vital to our cause. That's why it's so vital that we talk and ally ourselves with the media, that we have a progressive a message that is sent worldwide, that Caster's case is an affront to human dignity, is an affront to human rights, and is completely discriminatory and out of sync and out of place and out of step with human rights in the world today.
And how is Caster doing? You know, is she ready for this next level of the fight?
I smile because she is. I spoke to her just recently, and she says, we go for it. The most remarkable thing about Caster is her focus, her dedication, her commitment, and her fight. If one thinks about her as an athlete over the last 11 years and what she's accomplished from a young teenager, literally, to the person she is now, a double Olympic champion, a triple world champion, what she's accomplished there, while at the same time fighting a legal fight, is quite extraordinary. Her will and determination, Kathy, is very much there. It's very much part of her, and we as lawyers and the rest of the team draw strength from her whole being and her whole will. So, Caster's a wonderful client to have in that regard.
Gregory, how much of this work and getting the outcome that you desire also involves you having to lobby not just advocacy groups, but that will stand with you? But I imagine that some of the individuals who sit on these committees, who are going to be responsible for these decisions, are also those whose minds you would want to change.
Exactly. So it is a mind shift game, and that's why I'm so disappointed by the Swiss court, because at this point in our history, in our moment in history, if you look at America and Black Lives Matter and movements such as that, you're hoping that institutionalized racism and divides between black and white, divides between north and south, between rich and poor, can be eliminated. And it's all of those particular divides that we've got to look at and hopefully get a progressive line of thinking that happens. So it demands rigorous attention to advocacy and determination to try and change people's minds and thinking, to accept that this is a world without discrimination.
Do you have reason to believe that if Caster was a white athlete, she would not be treated in the way that she has been treated now?
It's a good question. Let me be candid and forthright. I would say yes.
So it's not just a matter, as far as you're concerned, that is constrained to her genetic makeup, but fundamentally that there is racism also at play here.
Whether it's blatant racism or not is a question out there, but certainly institutionalized racism we've spoken about, as I spoke about earlier, that movements such as Black Lives Matter are fighting in the States and so on. I don't want to make this a racial fight at all, but, one does put, let's just take the facts and have a look at a poor African woman from one of our poor provinces in South Africa having to fight in one of the wealthiest countries in the world to establish her rights. I mean, even on the point of access to justice, there's something to be considered there. I mean, is that completely fair? I would argue not. Would one not see that the fairness of the fight would happen, say, maybe somewhere on our continent or elsewhere? But to gather the resources to fight on behalf of Caster has been enormous strain, and enormous energy has had to be put behind it. And one would argue, would that necessarily happen for somebody coming from one of the European countries or wherever? So, to your question honestly, I think there are a lot against Caster and a lot against those. So.
And of course, what makes it ironic is that part of the ruling that came out was said to reinforce the playing field, to level the playing field and ensure that there was no unfair advantage by anyone. And yet, there's very much a disadvantage that has been created for Caster in this instance.
Precisely right. So there is, as you say, quite an irony to have a look at, and quite an irony to basically stomach, quite frankly. And it's those ironies that we, hopefully through the legal field, that's all I can do as a lawyer and my team can do, is fight the legalities. And hopefully it's the champions around us, like our Chapter 9 institutions, which I may say have been exemplary in their support of the cause. And I'm so delighted to be a South African where we can actually proudly talk of having a progressive constitution and a progressive Bill of Rights which can protect our citizens. So it's something that I'm so, in a way, bizarrely happy that we are championing, because on the world stage we are championing progressive thinking.
Gregory Knott, we're going to leave it there for tonight. Thanks for your time. He is Caster Semenya's lawyer, and we'll be keeping you updated then with the developments around that case as they head to the European Human Rights Court.